You say to those who consider it to be somewhat of a war crime for Israel to shut off all electricity, food, and water to Gaza. Now, granted that I would say that Israel, obviously, if they're the ones giving it to them, then they have the right to take it away in that sense. But I can't help but feel sorry for all of the Palestinians that may not be on board with what Hamas is doing in the Gaza region. So what would you say when it comes to those? Because I'm worried that there's going to be a lot more people, a lot more casualties as this continues to go. And I believe that obviously it's Hamas's fault to some extent for bringing all these people into Gaza in the first place and then holding them as hostage as well and hiding the military behind civilians. But what can we do, or what are your kind of thoughts on that situation when it comes to how we could resolve this? Is there any way to do it in another way, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. In the first place, we're not talking about a people that is innocent and oppressed by its government. I mean, obviously there's some, right, but 75% of the people in Gaza voted for Hamas. Right. And just recently there was a poll that showed that 75% of the Gazans still support Hamas. It was before all this started, but nonetheless, it's pretty clear that they love most of the people there. Obviously not all, but most of the people there love what's happening. Now, should the electricity and water be cut off? I think the first thing to ask about that is, did you know, and I ask the people watching this, how many of you knew that Israel was supplying free electricity and water to Gaza while Gaza is scheming to kill Israelis? How many people would say that a country that is supplying essential needs to another group that is a mortal enemy and wants it dead, that country's the oppressor? Obviously, the Israelis have been more than generous in this, and they only started to withhold some of this when the Palestinians refused to end their pay-for-slave program. The Palestinian Authority pays money to the terrorists who are in prison and to the families of terrorists who were killed. These are people who are murderers, who killed Israeli civilians, and the Palestinian Authority pays money to them or to their families. And so Israel started withholding from tax money that it actually was giving to the Palestinians, withholding the amount they were paying to the terrorists. But the free electricity and water just kept flowing. And so now they're saying that they're going to cut it off and everybody's all upset. And I think, how many of you knew it was even happening? And what about all this Arab solidarity with all the Arab Muslim countries supporting the Palestinians? Well, let them come in let the Egyptians open that southern border and come in with electricity and water. But why should Israel be supplying it when the Gazans are almost wholly dedicated to the mass murder of Israelis?
Okay, and we're getting kind of short on time here, so let's go ahead and watch the last clip, and then we'll come back to talk about that clip as well.
So as we examine the recent wave of violence, we must understand that this is the context that created the awful violence that we've just seen. We must also use this context and allow it to inform our next steps. To achieve a lasting peace, we cannot give a blank check to Israelis' right-wing governments. We cannot give them license to wipe out and destroy Palestinians without a moment's notice. We cannot allow or sanction the elimination of electricity and fuel and food to the Gaza Strip, which is a violation of international law as a form of collective punishment. We cannot continue to trap Gazans in an open-air prison. We cannot undermine the conditions for fair and free elections so that Fatah and Hamas can no longer rule without a democratic mandate. We all want peace, but justice is the necessary precondition for peace, and that will only come by ending the Israeli occupation, by dismantling the apartheid state, and by creating the conditions for freedom, safety, dignity, and determination for every Muslim, every Christian, every Jew, every Israeli, every Palestinian, every single person in the region.
That apartheid state business, John, is just a vicious slander. It's very common on the left for people to say that, but apartheid comes from South Africa. In South Africa, there was racial discrimination by the white minority against the black majority, and it was a system in which there were separate institutions, and the white ones were nice and the black ones were shoddy, and it was a systematized oppression, and that was apartheid. There is no apartheid in Israel. There are Israeli Arabs who are Muslims at every level of Israeli society. They have full equality of rights. The president of Bank Leumi, the largest bank in Israel, is an Arab. There are Arabs who are serving in the Knesset, the parliament of Israel. There were no black South Africans in the apartheid parliament. And the idea of Israeli apartheid just comes from what I was discussing before about the checkpoints and the searches for Palestinian Arabs wanting to come into Israel, which is just a matter of national security. The black South Africans who were suffering under real apartheid were not saying, we're going to blow up the white South Africans, we're going to kill them all, we're going to take over the place. Certainly, actually, there were some revolutionaries, but for the most part, you're talking about peaceful, innocent people. And in Israel, you do not have that. In Israel, you have these people who have been, you look at the Middle East Media Research Institute or Palestinian Media Watch, and you see again and again in the Palestinian media, there's incitement to hatred, to violence, and to genocide. And that is the reason why there is any suffering in the Palestinian areas. If they would, as the old adage goes, if the Palestinians laid down their arms, there would be peace. If the Israelis laid down their arms, there would be genocide.
All right. And last question before you go. Thank you for joining us. And where can people find more of your work and also this book that you've written on this subject?
Yeah, I'm at jihadwatch.org, and we're covering the jihad against Israel and the jihad against everybody else. Been there 20 years. It's at jihadwatch.org. And David Wood and I do a video every Wednesday night, or most Wednesday nights, This Week in Jihad, where we summarize some of the main events of the week. I've written 27 books, mostly on this aspects of the jihad, including The Palestinian Delusion, The Catastrophic History of the Middle East Peace Process. You can find those at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any self-respecting bookstore.
All right, Robert, good to see you again, man, and we'll talk soon. Now, if you're interested in following this story, make sure you subscribe because we'll be covering it with more special guests as the story continues to develop. In the meantime, check out this playlist with the other videos that